Thank you. Carrie Riddle.
My name is Carrie Riddle, and I'm a citizen of the Ward number 3. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to each of you. I'm here tonight to tell City Council, as every one of you here, my story. I, like most of you tonight, own guns and have a concealed permit. I, like most of you here, am also concerned about the series of bills presented to the General Assembly for consideration that will affect gun ownership, such as SB 16 and HB 961. I am telling my story tonight that very few have heard, to share a terrifying experience that I hope will open a conversation between both sides on common sense gun reforms. Several years ago, I found myself in an abusive relationship. One night, as he was getting ready for bed, he began to berate me to the point where he became enraged. He demanded that I get into bed with him and threatened me if I did not. I had no interest in doing so, and I told him I was leaving and no longer wanted to see him anymore. He continued to threaten me. He picked up his loaded Glock 21 with one in the chamber, pointed it to his head, finger on the trigger, partially pulled. He proceeded to tell me he did not care about what I had to say and that he would be damned if he took his own life first. His sister had taken her life over a lost relationship, and he promised me he would never go first. At this point, all I could think about were my 2 young daughters who were at home with their babysitter. I was and am their sole provider. My phone, car keys, and purse were on the kitchen table downstairs. I knew that there was no way I would make it back to my phone and keys before he could turn that gun on me. I couldn't flee, nor did I have a way to fight back. I was trapped. I simply crumpled to the floor crying. He continued to hold the gun and demand that I get into that bed with him. Sobbing on the floor, I pleaded with him to stop. And by the grace of God alone, he agreed to put that gun down if I got into bed. I picked myself up, got into that bed, laying on the very edge as far away from him as I could, continuing to sob. I never slept that night, keeping my eye on that gun. I left the next morning terrified, and I carried my concealed with me everywhere. I didn't know what I could do to protect myself. There were no witnesses, no bruises, no video. I felt there was no way to let the authorities know what happened, no way to potentially prevent him from doing it again. I tell this story to everyone tonight to plead that both sides. Common sense gun reform such as extreme risk, protective orders, or red flag laws should be considered. Several laws, such as HB 240, are the beginning step forward to accomplishing this method. And it is unfair to assume all bills currently proposed in the General Assembly are unconstitutional and strictly against the everyday gun owner.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle. Michael Graham.
Michael Graham, Ward 1. Hi, Ms. Dolan. I emailed you, and you proceeded to forward that email, so I'm here to talk to you right now. So in that email, I described to you how at 2 a.m. my wife and I woke up to somebody kicking at our door. It took the police officers 23 minutes to get to my door. So that's one reason why I need a gun. Now, just to point this out, that basically you had a string of emails that were completely demeaning from my email. You forwarded it on, and you had the time as your constituent to reply to me, and you never replied. You forwarded it on. You went as far as to say that I was probably not even a Lynchburg, or the person that you were speaking with said that I probably was not even a Lynchburg resident. On top of that, it was also said that I was probably not even trained to arms. I put more rounds down last year than the most 20 to 30% of your police department is a minimum. So yes, I am very well trained to arms. I would like to actually take the rest of this time to approach this from more of a financial standpoint. It takes about $100 a day to take one person and to house them in a jail. Now, what that means is at the rate that we have Lynchburg folks, we have about probably 25% of people in Lynchburg are going to be a gun owner affected by these laws. There are 59 laws, last I counted, that takes into effect somebody that's going to be affected in this room. Now, looking at that from a fiscal standpoint, you as a council are required by the Constitution to be held to a budget. You cannot have any type of deficit. So based on these numbers, at a low end of 25% of Lynchburg residents, you're going to be looking at around 19,000 people who are going to be impacted by these gun laws. So you have to have that funding in your budget in order to actually account for that. So what that means is that at 19,000 people, $100 a day, that would be around $693,500,000 per year, or $3,467,500,000 over the next 5 years. Now, just so that you guys are aware, we do not have that money. I'm sure you are because you take care of our budget. This is only housing. This is nothing to do with the city fees. This has nothing to do with policing, the police department. This has absolutely nothing to do with, or absolutely everything to do with trying to get more people. You have jails that you have to build. You'll have to have new people, new clerks coming in to do this. You'll have to, I've read a FOIA on your city attorney. She did not have the means to take care of the animal abuse that the past law March of last year. So on top of that, you're going to be saying that you're going to be taking 25% of your population.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Thank you very
Comment
much.
time is up. William Jennings.
Well, I didn't think there was going to be this many people here, actually, but I'll try my best to do a little talking. During my career as an engineer, a civilian engineer, I've had the opportunity to work overseas. Some of that work was in countries that were not terribly friendly, Afghanistan being one of them. And what I saw there, and when I went there, I was not a Second Amendment advocate, even though I'd lived in Virginia a very long period of time. But what I got to see when I was over there is what the abuse of power can do. People were randomly picked up, and I saw this. I was a civilian over there. I had no guns. I wasn't in the military. I had no way of defending myself. I was dependent on some sketchy security. But they would arbitrarily arrest people or just take them basically to gain money. The people had no way of defending themselves because the average Iraqi citizen had no gun. He had no means. So whether it was the police department or some warlord, they ran roughshod over the populace. I mean, that's a really extreme scenario. But when you do eventually, as the intent is for these Bloomberg types, these steps are only a first step. When they do run roughshod and get us back to flintlocks, where I've heard many a person say that that's all at the revolution, so that's all the founding fathers intended, which we all know is pretty far-fetched. But when we get down there, we will have no defense. We can vote all we want, but they won't listen. They'll do whatever they want. Somebody will come to power. You've seen it in countries all around the world. Argentina, very democratic republic. And what happened? They're a corrupt dictatorship now. So I've probably spoken longer than I want to, but the right to bear arms was put in the Constitution for a reason. And for those of you who don't believe it, spend some quality hours reading the Federalist Papers, written by people like Hamilton and Madison. Read those documents and learn what they really meant about us having the rights and protecting ourselves from, and they even use the word, states like New York, okay? Where the smaller states would have to have rights, states' rights. Well, this bill is a statement. We need to make a statement to Richmond that we will not follow.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Mr. Troxel, speaking for the Freedom Caucus of 6th Congressional District.
I don't guess I'll wait for my 5 minutes to go.
You can
up
go
there.
ahead. I'm timing too. Thank
I
you.
do represent the Freedom Caucus of Virginia Congressional District 6. I am a Lynchburg resident, have been since 1985. I'm also a voting member of Virginia's 6th Congressional District Republican Committee. Just a couple of years ago, the 6th District Republican Committee filed a suit against the government of Virginia because the government chose to uphold an unconstitutional law commonly called the Incumbent Protection Act. We won our case in federal district court and in the Federal Court of Appeals. The state declined to take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. It cost the state a lot of money to defend this unconstitutional law. Not only did they have to pay the Attorney General's office, but because it was a violation of the Constitution, the state had to pay our lawyers close to $250,000. The gun laws currently before the General Assembly are unconstitutional. They will be taken to court, they will lose, and the state will have to pay both their lawyers and our lawyers when they lose. If you support these laws by your silence, the city of Lynchburg could be financially liable as well. And if Lynchburg legal officers confiscate weapons, and especially if someone is assaulted or killed in the absence of their personal weapons, Lynchburg will face not only legal bills, but also compensatory and punitive damages as well. To save Lynchburg a lot of money, you need to pass this ordinance and declare that Lynchburg will not enforce unconstitutional laws. Can you do that? Contrary to what you've heard earlier, you can, because Attorney General Herring, after he was first inaugurated in 2014, declined to defend in federal court the marriage amendment of the Virginia Constitution, stating that, quote, irrespective of the action of the people in amending their Constitution, that as an exercise of his independent judgment, he had concluded that when a provision of the Virginia Constitution or statute violates the federal Constitution, he is not duty-bound to defend it. This established two precedents. One, an elected official who reaches the independent judgment that a state statute is in violation of the U.S. Constitution is at liberty to decline to enforce that statute. And an elected official has the power to take affirmative steps to block enforcement of an unconstitutional statute. The General Assembly has established the precedent of governmental non-cooperation with unconstitutional laws of a superior government authority. On February 28, 2012, with both Attorney General Herring and Governor Northam, who were then legislators, voting in the affirmative, the General Assembly passed House Bill 1160, which prohibited Virginia from assisting the federal government in the unlawful detention of U.S. citizens under the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act. Thus, the General Assembly established the principle that a subordinate level of government has the authority and indeed the responsibility to refuse to cooperate with a higher level of government when the higher government enacts a law which violates the Constitution of the United States. It only follows that this non-cooperation applies when local governments are faced with unconstitutional statutes enacted by the General Assembly. It only follows that the City Council of Lynchburg not only has the right, but the duty to pass this ordinance to protect the city from legal action and from doing the wrong thing in regard to both our state and national constitutions, documents that you swore to uphold when you took your oath of office. And I write a weekly email, and I wrote a weekly email a couple of weeks ago talking about how Attorney General Herring's gun law opinion in December is total hypocrisy. I've got a copy for each of you, but I don't know how to get it to you. So if somebody up there would like to pass it out, I would be happy to let you read that at your leisure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Troxel. Next is Richard Burke, Corey Thomas, Lorenzo Sines, Evan Merck, Alita Robertson, Early Bryant or Bryant Early. Again, Richard Burke, Corey Thomas, Lorenzo Sines, Evan Merck, Alita Robertson, and Bryant Early. Thank you, Richard Burke.
Okay, so I'm Richard Burke and I live in Lynchburg, and I strongly encourage each of you to vote against designating Lynchburg a Second Amendment sanctuary city. You face a matter here that requires a reasonable consideration of facts, right? Certain relevant things, I think, are indisputably true. Guns can be dangerous. Guns in the hands of certain individuals are particularly dangerous. These things are true. Equally true, certainly, are such things, such facts as hunting is a very popular activity. It's an important part of many families' traditions. Equally true, many people feel the need for a gun, to be in possession of a gun if they are to feel safe and protected. These are facts. We can talk about them reasonably. The outcry for this current measure appears to be a rejection both of facts and of reason. No one is seriously expecting the banning of all firearms in the Commonwealth of Virginia. No one is seriously, no
Respect.
reasonable person is seriously anticipating the forced confiscation of firearms from people. Gun rights advocates make these claims to justify, they have done it for decades, to justify their opposition to even the most reasonable legislation. They cry that people want to take away all their guns. That's simply not going to happen. They regularly insist that a well-armed citizenry is the only safeguard against government tyranny. Anyone who imagines that armed citizens could stand up against the strongest, best-trained army in the world is simply ignoring reality.
Respect while people are talking.
Those who pay attention to the facts and those who pay no attention to the facts and those who choose to act without regard for reason and good judgment become extremists. And extremists on either side of an issue are always dangerous to society. I ask you to consider the realities we face, to think calmly and reasonably about them, to side against extremism, and to make the judgment that Lynchburg, like Virginia, and the rest of the country benefits from common sense gun laws. Thank you.
Corey Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the members of the City Council for giving us this opportunity to speak. I know we all appreciate it. At this moment, the Commonwealth of Virginia is the object of scrutiny by every other state in the Union. I don't think it's too much to say that we are at a historic crossroads when it comes to how our citizens will be allowed by law to arm or defend themselves. And one of the unfortunate characteristics of the dialogue around this issue is that it's primarily carried on by men. Now, I know we've had female speakers tonight, but we are generally in the minority when it comes to talking about this issue. The legislators writing these bills and many of those opposing them are overwhelmingly male, and the opinions of women are often assumed or underrepresented. But we have a unique stake in this issue, and all of us deserve to have our opinions heard. According to the National Sexual Resource Center, 1 in 5 women will be raped in their lifetimes. That number is 1 in 71 for men. 1 in 3 women will experience some kind of sexual violence. Less than half as many men will suffer the same. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence found in 2015 that women were more than twice as likely as men to suffer, quote, severe intimate partner physical violence. The Bureau of Justice Statistics report on criminal victimization for 2018 states that women were slightly more likely than men to be the victims of every kind of violent crime apart from homicide. On a daily basis, women have to deal with threats that men simply do not have to think about as urgently. And while I do not have the claim to being particularly short that other female speakers have had, I think I have some of the same concerns. Women's safety should be a core concern to our legislation at all levels, especially at the local level. This is why no obstacle should be placed in the way of women defending themselves in any manner they see fit, including exercising their right to bear arms. In November of 2015, a woman in Florida heard sounds of an altercation in her house. She walked into her living room to find that 2 intruders armed with handguns had pistol whipped her husband and were threatening to shoot her daughter. She ran back into her bedroom, grabbed the family's AR-15, and shot at one of the intruders, mortally wounding him. She was 8 months pregnant at the time. If the kind of laws Richmond is suggesting were enforced in this case, that woman, her unborn child, her husband, and her daughter would all likely have been killed. The practical outcomes of this proposed legislation will be to make the citizens of Virginia more vulnerable in situations like these, and women will be most vulnerable at all. While I fully support the idea that those with histories of mental illness or criminal behavior should not have access to any firearms, placing unnecessary barriers in the way of women's self-defense only tells us that our legislation is more concerned with scoring political points than with the safety of those who are most at risk. So I urge you, therefore, to support the proposed Second Amendment sanctuary. The women of Lynchburg are counting on you to support their right to defend themselves. Thank you very much.
Lorenzo Sines.
Yes, ma'am, it is Signs. My name is Lorenzo. I've been a resident here in Lynchburg since 2008 when my parents moved us down here. Now, I'm a son of an immigrant. My father came to this country based on its constitution, his love for it. He built his fortune here on American soil. Now, sorry, it's just, but we are gathered here, all of us, to see what you, our council members, our representatives, will do. My father is watching as well as many more of my family who have immigrated here to the United States from Mexico, a living nightmare in some areas. Now, as for my mother's side of the family, they did not fight for over 200 years for Americans to see our rights trampled on at all. Whether you're Republican, whether you're Democrat, whether you're moderate, it is our unalienable rights to have freedom of speech, to be able to protect ourselves. And as an older brother and as a son who takes care of his parents, how are they to defend themselves when I'm not around? How am I to defend myself? I'm 24 years old. And what, am I supposed to sit there and just die when a criminal comes to assault my family? Am I to just sit there and wait for the police who have astounding response times? And this is not an insult to our police force. This is not an insult. But that's the facts. That's the truth. That's what I live with every day. We're from Maryland, from the northern part of Baltimore, where there is more gun violence than there is here. And I tell you, I wouldn't walk around in Baltimore without a gun on my side. So in conclusion, for each and every one of you, because there are neighbors here, I have friends, I have family in this audience. What would you do if somebody were coming to assault your family, to kill them, to rape them? And that's all I have to say in conclusion.
Thank you. Evan Merck. Evan Merck.
Good evening, council members. My name is Evan Murch. I'm from Ward 2.
Sorry.
I wanted to point out a fallacy that takes place when the people who wish to restrict gun rights and wish to suppress the Second Amendment essentially try to say that we will be safer if there are more restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is laws do not create an ethical people. Only the fear of God can create an ethical people. So while gun violence is a terrible tragedy, much like drunk driving, the answer is not to ban cars or to make you only allowed to drive certain cars that are extremely safe. The answer is always to bring the fear of God back into the public square. Because at the end of the day, laws will not change anything. The Second Amendment was put in place for us to defend ourselves, to defend our country, to defend our state, in case enemies, evil criminals who are intent to do harm, whether they are among us as thugs or whether they are in Richmond, so that they cannot tyrannize us. That is what the Second Amendment was designed for, and any student of history should know this. Now, again, I plead with you that you would pass this resolution because failure to do so will result in many people very likely being felons that were otherwise law-abiding people who just wanted to protect their families and their freedoms. Thank you.
Alita Robertson.
Hello, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor and City Council. I respectfully come before you. My name is Alita Robertson. I have lived in the city of Lynchburg for 58 years. 40 years ago, I walked across that stage as a graduate of E.C. Glass High School. I've lived 30 years just a couple blocks over from here. I used to walk to this school and run the track. I no longer feel safe to do that. I'm invested in the community. I support many community programs within this, and everything from the detention home, you name it. I support it, and I support this community, and I support many things that you guys I've seen. I've been with you guys, and I support it. But I no longer feel safe in my own neighborhood. I told my husband the other day, I don't think I can take it anymore. I'm no longer able to walk across the street, the food line, and just buy a gallon of milk without being harassed. I mean, within the store, I get followed. I no longer can pull up in front of my house to just come in from work without feeling afraid. I have to call my husband. I pulled up front. Please escort me in. Through this process, I've never grown up with holding a gun in my hand. I have gone and got my concealment. I go and practice. I feel safer now because my husband cannot be with me all the time. I need to even the odds. As this past summer, my son was coming home he goes to the University of Lynchburg, he walks. He approaches up from the back alley. There's two individuals on my back porch trying to figure out how to get into our house. He scared them off. I don't know what had happened if I'd been home by myself, but I know I'd have been protected. This is my home. This is my neighborhood. I have grown this. You guys are my community. And I need y'all to support me and to help me. Y'all represent me. I know we have different beliefs, but this is something we need to support. I don't want to be vulnerable anymore. Do you want to say, hey, if somebody was to come into my house, what am I going to do? Say, hey, didn't you get the memo? You can't do that. That's not what we're doing. I'm going to hit them with a coffee cup, a shoe, an umbrella. No, I've got to even the odds, and I need this protection. I have gone through the training. I'm not out there. You can tell just the way I'm dressed. I'm a businesswoman. I work really hard in this community, but this community is changing. Where I live, all the houses I've gone around to rentals. Please pass this. Please pass this. Make us safe in the sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. Early Bryant, or Mr. Bryant Early.
I'm Early Bryant from Lynchburg. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a gun owner and I support the Second Amendment. I do have a concealed carry permit. With all the mass shootings going on, and I've had some threats myself on my life. I'm going for a walk in my neighborhood. Street gangs threaten me. That's why I've got my permit. But I do not respect these new gun laws. A lot of decent people become convicted felonies. They will lose their jobs, lose their voting rights, so they can't vote the Democrats out of office. I support the Second Amendment. That's all I have.
Next.
He decided to yield me his time.
Please state, I'm sorry, you're not signed up on the list?
He decided to yield me his time. My name
But
is
it's only to the people that are signed up on the list. Thank you.
Yielding me my time.
Next is Mr. Wendell Walker, Jennifer Brown.
Thank you.
Wendell Walker, delegate. Jennifer Brown, 6th District Republican Committee. Ryan Thomas, Landon Riggleman. Mr. Walker.
Mayor, am I up first? Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Wendell Walker, a city resident. First of all, let me say thank you for moving this public hearing to a larger venue by which so many people could be heard. That is an important part of government, listening to the public. I'd also like to thank our wonderful Chief of Police, Ryan Zudemer, and his great staff of police officers who are here tonight to provide for our safety and a gun-free zone. So Mayor Tweedy, members of City Council, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight regarding Lynchburg joining with over 100 other localities and becoming a Second Amendment sanctuary city. I have a great concern regarding the direction our Commonwealth is headed in concerning public safety and our ability to protect ourselves. The Second Amendment of our Constitution guarantees our right to defend and protect ourselves and our families. If we lose our Second Amendment rights, then we know the First Amendment will be next. Recent changes in Richmond at the Virginia State Capitol are preventing individuals from carrying weapons of self-defense on Capitol grounds. In order for the citizens to keep and maintain the Second Amendment rights, then the ballot box is the place for this battle. I fear that we are on a slippery slope to tyranny. Thomas Jefferson, one of Virginia's early fathers of our Constitution, feared that one day we would face tyranny, and without the Second Amendment, we would not be able to defend ourselves, and we would become a nation no more. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to read just a small portion from our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. I carry this with me all the time to help people to understand the importance of our freedoms and liberties. If I may, just a short paragraph from the Declarations of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The rights of these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, we the people. That whatever form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. In closing, members of council, there is an answer to the problems that we face out here. And it's not in our government, it's in our faith and in the Word of God. I'd like to share with you one verse real quick. 2 Corinthians 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I, God, will hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their lands. Ladies and gentlemen, January the 20th, you have another opportunity to join your elected officials in Richmond for another lobby day. I'd encourage you to attend. Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council, for the opportunity to address you tonight.
Thank you.
Since I'm part of a group, do I get 5 minutes?
Yes. Please state the name of your group.
Okay. I am with the 6th District Republican Committee, and I am also the president of Second Amendment Alliance. Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here this evening. My name is Jennifer Brown, and I am the 6th District Chair of the Republican Committee. I am not here because this all began with a political agenda from the left. I am here because I am a concerned citizen who is fighting for my rights under the Constitution, as well as fighting for the rights of every citizen here in Lynchburg, the 6th District, Virginia, and the nation. The Second Amendment guarantees the right for an individual to keep and bear arms. This is not negotiable. However, because there are those who want to erase what our founding fathers established as the law of the land over 200 years ago, here we stand before you, fighting for a right that has already been guaranteed. There are people on the opposite side who will say that if we are not happy with the outcome of the last election, then vote the legislators out during the next election. This is absolutely correct. And that is why I implore every single conservative constitutional patriot here today to join their local Republican committee so that we can vote those who are going to infringe upon our constitutional freedoms out. However, this is not about being not happy with the election results. This is about infringement on constitutional rights. Not only the U.S. Constitution, but also the Virginia Constitution. The same rights that every elected official, including this council, swore to uphold when taking the oath of office. I am also an attorney, and these laws will make law-abiding citizens into automatic felons. Yes, we are a nation of laws. However, the Constitution is the law of the land, by which all other laws shall abide. There is a reason the Founding Fathers added, "shall not be infringed" to the Second Amendment, because they were prepared for a day such as this. Finally, I am also a daughter of this Commonwealth. My ancestors settled in Rockingham County in 1768. My grandfather served in World War II, my great-uncle served in the Korean War, and my uncle served in Vietnam. I got my fighting spirit from them, and that is why I'm fighting today. I will not allow their service to our country to preserve our rights and freedoms be forgotten with the stroke of a pen. Criminals will not abide by these laws, and the only ones who will suffer are those of us who will no longer be able to defend ourselves. The citizens should not be made defenseless due to the wiles of those in the General Assembly. This is not about gun control, because that argument was settled in 1791. This is about control of the people and silencing those who do not agree. The reason we have the Second Amendment is to protect the First. This is not about breaking the law. This is about upholding the Constitution. This is not about causing a scene. This is about taking a stand. This is not about fighting for an agenda. This is about defending our rights. We can choose to be compliant, or we can refuse to be sheep led to slaughter. We can choose to become history, or we can make history. This is about we the people, and we the people are asking you to send a message to Richmond that you will stand up for your constituents and protect our rights. Yes, we are a republic, and we the people are asking for your help to help us keep it. Thank you.
Ryan Thomas. Ryan Thomas, thank you. Please begin.
Good evening. Councilmember Wright, during the last City Council meeting, you made some remarks that I would like to address. You stated that if we were to pass a resolution on this issue, it wouldn't carry legal weight. I would like to assuage your concerns by pointing out that many local officials who share your political persuasion have been selectively enforcing laws for years. You then went on to say, quote, "It is our job to enforce the laws that the state passes," as if this absolves you of the responsibility of addressing the enforcement protocols of ethically questionable legislation. If a state law mandated that you execute people for drinking Coke, you would no doubt refuse to enforce it. It's a silly example, but it exposes the obvious problem with what is an equally untenable position, which is that you are necessarily obliged to enforce a law because it is, quote, "your job." Reality is more complicated than this. You are part and parcel of the apparatus that makes a law what it is. Apart from enforcement, a law is just words on paper. It will be this city's resources that you in part control, that will be used to deprive citizens of their enumerated rights when these pre-filed bills pass. And these bills do have the votes to pass, contrary to what some have said here. We all know what the deal is, especially with Bloomberg's money weighing so heavily on the future political prospects of so many Democrat legislators in the Virginia House and Senate. If a law is unethical, the moral failure lies not with those who wrote it, not only with those who wrote it, but also with all who enforce it. We were just doing our jobs has never been and will never be an acceptable defense for carrying out unethical orders. It is difficult to imagine anyone of sound mind who has read the pre-filed bills being able to say with any modicum of conviction that these are ethical dictates. This cannot be punted to the courts. Besides the unacceptable amount of time that would be required for the courts to act, time during which innocent people would have their freedom and even their lives taken from them, the courts have upheld contemptible legislation in the past. They've also upheld contemptible institutions in the past for about a century. The time to act is now, and you do in fact have the power to act. Your moral duties transcend your legal ones. Even so, you also took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and the slew of draconian dictates pre-filed in Richmond are not only of highly questionable constitutional merit, but represent a rabid contempt for the Second Amendment. These bills are nothing short of punitive and, taken together, would make owning and training with a firearm all but impossible. I refuse to believe that anyone intelligent enough to win a public seat would fail to recognize just how grossly violative of the Constitution these bills are. And to certain gun control advocacy groups, please stop weaponizing spurious claims of victimhood for the sake of optics. The fact is that you have nothing to fear from us except perhaps for rational conversation. Thank you.
Landon Riggleman.
Thank you to council for holding this meeting, and thank you in particular to Councilman Jeff Helgeson and Councilman Perro for being the catalyst that allows us to have this conversation. In the last meeting in December, one of the common themes of those that voted nay on the Second Amendment sanctuary issue was that this was not local, this was not for city council. I feel that couldn't be further from the truth. The fact is, it's city council that determines if we're going to enforce these laws, and it's city council that's going to tell our sheriff and our police chief to go around and collect firearms. And it's also city council that will direct law enforcement to say, you must go, and it's putting them in harm's way. Another issue that came up is that in the General Assembly, we were supposed to hear what the philosophy was going to be on the Second Amendment based on who was elected. Well, in the Lynchburg general area, we had 4 elections last cycle. And in all 4 instances, we selected 4 conservative, staunch pro-Second Amendment people. And the reason we elected them is because they trusted us with our rights, and they trusted us with the responsibility of owning firearms, just like our founding fathers did. In the Second Amendment, they laid it out as plain as can be. shall not be infringed. There is not unless, there's no in the instance of, nothing else, just shall not be infringed. And that's because the founding fathers trusted the American people with the right and responsibility to bear arms. And I ask council to give us that same right, and I ask you to trust your constituency. Lynchburg has responsible, law-abiding gun owners. We are not criminals, and we do not seek to use guns in a criminal manner. We only want to be able to defend ourselves and others the way our founding fathers intended. So I ask council to go in the same manner that our founding fathers did, so many of whom were from our great Commonwealth, and trust your constituency with firearms. These individuals that wrote the Constitution, they were not anything like we have in government today. These were the greatest political minds ever assembled in the history of the human race. They were the 95 bulls of politicians, and they trusted their people with firearms. With that in mind, I ask you all to trust your constituencies with firearms. And I also ask you to keep in mind that should you say that you will not trust us with firearms, that we certainly can elect members of council who will.
Jordan Olaker, Jordan Olaker, Mary Ellen Gordon Scudder, Tim Weiger, Reverend Dr. Richard Helene, Joshua Worley. Again, Jordan Olaker, Mary Ellen Gordon Scudder, Tim Weiger, Reverend Dr. Richard Helene, and Joshua Worley. Thank you.
My name is Mary Ellen Gordon Scudder. I'm a resident of Lynchburg, and I come representing myself and many others. One, my minister, Reverend Marge Brown, Unity in the Seven Hills. She is with a group of ministers praying for a peaceful resolution of this painful gun safety issue. I speak also for many of my friends and fellow Lynchburg citizens who are not here tonight, but who share my concern about Lynchburg becoming a Second Amendment sanctuary. I ask that you reject this proposal. I propose instead that we show respect to our system of state government, and I think it's very appropriate that if you object to the laws, that you contact your state representatives and that you go to Lobby Day next week. But it seems to me that Governor Northam's proposals are pretty reasonable.
Respect while people are talking.
Universal background checks? Seriously, don't we need to see some kind of qualification to own a gun?
Respect while people are talking. Please, please, may I interrupt you 1 moment?
My time's
I understand.
running out.
Give respect to the speakers so they can be heard on both sides. Please continue.
Okay, there are a lot of orange stickers around here, and they say, let me read it. Guns there it is. Guns save lives. Guns save lives. Guns kill. Guns kill also. Governor, listen please. Governor Northam has also suggested objective research to gather some information about gun safety. And do more guns really make us safe? I don't think so. But the governor has made this proposal, so let's let's listen. Let's listen to each other. I listen to you
Ms.
all.
Gordon Scudder, your time is up. I did take a few seconds, but please, thank you for your comments. I am about to tell everyone, we want to respect everyone's opinion, but we want people to be heard. We cannot do that if people voice in the middle of people talking. So I'm asking you to respect those persons who are talking at the microphone. I'm asking you to respect those persons at the microphone. Please give your name.
Jordan Olashay, Lynchburg.
Olashay, thank you.
I know that you guys hear lots of political discourse, and that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about basic philosophy. All good societies are based on the principles of life and liberty. All of them. In America, we've also been blessed with the idea of the pursuit of happiness. Specifically, though, I want to talk about the first 2 points, and I will also touch on the pursuit of happiness. The idea of life, the idea that that is a right for people. What we're talking about is not just simple living, we're not talking about how we live with that. We're talking about people's right to actually be alive. And that is closely married to the idea of liberty. The idea of people being killed by one another, or the idea of a government killing its people. That is what we were protecting ourselves from by ensuring that life is a right. One of the ways that we've done this historically is through the use of firearms. And anyone who will say that we couldn't fight a military, I don't think that they get the point. All of the people in the military are also people. If the military were to split up and have a war, it would not just be them against the people. The military would split, they would fight themselves too. We're not talking about a society of just us and the military. We're not at odds with each other. We're all humans. So the idea that it's just going to be people fighting the military is ridiculous. Nobody wants a civil war. That's not what we're here for. What we want is for the rights of people to protect themselves from any individual who will harm them, as well as the rights of people to protect themselves from tyrannical government. That's what the Second Amendment is about. So, one of the other major things that I wanted to focus on is some people said that it's not their jobs to determine whether federal regulation is good or bad. It's their job to enforce it. I just want to say that that's ridiculous. Your job is to represent the people, and the people want you to protect their rights, not to protect some weird agenda that attacks the premise of the country. So, I didn't have time to talk on pursuit of happiness, but thank you.
Tim Weiger.
My name is Tim Weiger, and I'm a citizen of Lynchburg, Ward 1. With my limited time, I'd like to use an analogy to explain why protecting the Second Amendment is critical to our security and well-being. Specifically, I will expand on the analogy of the sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. For those unfamiliar with this analogy, the wolves are those who would do evil to others. The sheep are those who are unarmed and vulnerable. And the sheepdogs are those who are willing and able to protect themselves and others from the wolves. They would never hurt anyone except to protect others. But these three categories are not sufficient to include everyone. In particular, where do the leftist lawmakers fit? They're certainly not sheep. After all, they have the power to make laws that affect us all. I assume that for now they're not wolves, and they clearly are not sheepdogs. They're not doing anything to protect anybody. In fact, the proposed laws would reduce the number of sheepdogs in the future and weaken the ones that exist today. further emboldening the wolves among us. Since they don't fit into any of these existing categories, I propose a fourth category. I believe that these lawmakers see themselves as ranchers. I apologize to any ranchers who are rightly offended at the prospect of this comparison, but my point is this. These leftist lawmakers see themselves as having dominion over the sheep and the sheepdogs, and they act as if they also have dominion over the wolves. However, we all know that they only have dominion over the wolves who are in prison, and these same lawmakers are tripping over each other in a race to release them back into society, or never put them in prison in the first place. And now these ranchers are telling us that the solution to violence is to defang the sheepdog. Limits on magazine size, prohibitions of guns that have cosmetic features that some find too scary. These arbitrary rules are the first step down the path of disarmament. Their intent is to intimidate sheepdogs to comply or have their lives ruined. These proposed limitations will do nothing to make people safer. The ranchers do not control the wolves. And to those who say they're not taking your firearms, they just want them to be registered. What's wrong with registration? Well, first off, they are taking them from the next generation. Second, just imagine a world where all the guns are already registered. In that world, confiscation is unnecessary. It's already known who possesses the guns that were legal yesterday but will be illegal tomorrow. Turn them in or you're a felon. Remember what the relationship is between the sheep and the rancher. I promise you, it never ends well for the sheep.
Reverend Dr. Helene Richard, or Richard Helene.
Yes, hi, thank you, council members, for having this meeting. I am Reverend Dr. Rick Helene. I say that only because, and I guess I kind of want to address the vice mayor on this, because I did see the tape after everybody was dismissed in December, and the ensuing missed button, missed vote, and then let's not have the meeting because all of us are too extreme, too scary, and we're suppressing the voices of those who oppose us. I am a Marine. My shirt that I'm wearing says that I am a veteran. And in 1983, in August, I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America from both enemies, foreign and domestic. And I was never relieved of that oath just because I no longer wear the uniform. I am a federally trained killer, and I am trained to kill the enemy of law-abiding people, no matter where it takes me. But I'm also an ordained minister. I'm a pastor. I have 6 degrees, many of them in the social and behavioral sciences. I have spent 20 years in the ministry counseling at-risk children with my wife, who taught Anacostia DC people, and from my friend who said that it is ludicrous that a government would ever ban firearms outright and confiscate them. Try to take pepper spray into Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America. Everything is banned in that city. This is no small thing. I agree that we all have a need for safety and security. It's a basic human need. I don't need a degree to tell you that. I want my 4 children and my wife to be safe at home. But I will tell you, this is not about gun safety. This is about power. This is about power grabbing, and it's starting in Richmond. But this is not a Virginia issue. This is not a Lynchburg issue. This is a national issue, and you took the same oath. And if you can't vote yes to protecting us against Richmond, then the next thing you should do after your no vote is furnish your resignation.
Joshua Worley.
I still got 24 seconds.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
This is exactly the moment that our founding fathers feared. Just because it's been 200 years there is no common sense in gun laws. Pass laws that convict and deal with criminals and behavioral health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joshua Worley.
My name is Joshua Worley. I live here in Lynchburg City. My wife is home, my pregnant wife is home right now, and I know she's sleeping safe and sound because the door is locked and she's lying next to a gun. The CDC estimates that between 500,000 and 2.2 million people a year use guns defensively. That means that banning firearms, which are responsible for a total of about 100,000 deaths a year, most of those being suicides or gang violence, would kill 5 to 20 times more people than it would ever save. And I don't think that's a good idea. Most gun crimes or mass shootings have occurred in gun-free zones where citizens have not been able to properly arm or defend themselves. And as far as the delusions of thinking that people would easily surrender over their guns, that's not going to happen. New Zealand recently passed a law requiring that all citizens owning certain firearms hand them over. A mandatory buyback costing taxpayers $20 million of their own money, collected 50,000 total guns in the country with 1.2 million, but only 15,000 of them were the newly outlawed guns out of 50 to 175,000 of the outlawed weapons, which means they only got 30 to 8% of them at best. Also, here in the US, bump stocks were recently outlawed by executive action, not by an act of Congress, and only 582 of them were handed over to the ATF out of an estimated 280,000 to 520,000 of them. Why would people expect better cooperation with an outright ban of previously legal weapons without compensation, and with such a ban already prohibited by the Second Amendment of the Constitution and by our state constitution? Gun control has also had a deep history of racism, disproportionately affecting poor Black and minority communities, leaving them more vulnerable to crime and violence, including voter intimidation and hate crimes. That's about all I have to say about it.
Next is Eric Harrison for Senator Steve Newman, John Miska, Josiah Weibel, Roger Fons, Jack Gary Underwood, Eric Harrison for Senator Steve Newman, John Miska, Josiah Weibel, Roger Fons, Jack Gary Underwood. Thank you.
Eric Harrison had to leave, but he asked me to read Senator Newman's statement for him. If that's okay with the council?
Yes.
Senator Newman wrote, "Serving on the local government is a high calling, and I do not presume to tell locally elected officials what to do in their elected capacity. So I will not start tonight, but I do want to thank the deeply concerned citizens that have shown up here to defend our Constitution and our basic freedoms. We are at a critical time in our Commonwealth's history. The next 53 days will determine whether our basic constitutional freedoms remain intact. Each generation has a responsibility to protect our freedoms, and now is our time. The Second Amendment may be under attack today, but tomorrow it could be the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment. I wish I could be with you tonight, but my legislative responsibilities require me to be at the Virginia Capitol. I strongly commend the freedom-loving Virginians who support our Constitution and stand to be heard at this pivotal and consequential time. God bless you all. Senator Steve Newman."
Thank you. John Miska.
Madam Mayor, members of council, my name is John Miska. I am a veteran. Some 47 years ago, I took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Like that other gentleman that was a veteran said, there was no expiration on the defense of the Constitution. Yet here in our society and in Virginia today, our legislature, which has been bought and paid for by outside individuals outside of Virginia, has bought and paid for a General Assembly that does not represent all of the people. And yes, elections have consequences. As former Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill once said, "All politics are local." And here you are, the most local as we can get. You are our city council. You have an opportunity to speak out. And this opportunity comes, like Frederick Douglass said, with freedoms. And freedoms, he said, came in boxes. And the two most strong boxes he talked about were the ballot box and the cartridge box. That he, as a free man, after the Civil War, realized that to preserve the freedoms, they would often have to resort to self-defense. Now, I don't know why things have gotten turned around and that people of color now predominantly are Democrats instead of Republicans, the party who freed them, the party that armed black Republicans, the party that had the first blacks in state and federal government. Now, I see what's happening is an effort by that same party who rode out on horses wearing sheets to intimidate the newly freed slaves because they were Republicans, not Democrats. And that those newly freed slaves armed themselves in defense. And some of the earliest beginnings of that organization, the National Rifle Association, came about because of the defense of those former slaves. Now, I say that we, as a free people, are not subjects, and that it can be
Thank you, Mr. Weibel. Thank you. Roger Fons. Roger Fons.
My name's Roger Fons, and I was a captain in the United States Army, fought in Vietnam twice. I was drafted. Okay, and I took the same oath as these other boys took, okay? So, this girl over here destroyed my speech, so I'm gonna have to ad-lib it, okay? So, I'm gonna give you this food for thought, okay? When all the guns have been banned, and all the words have been censored, when all of the history has been erased, when all the freedom has been taken, only then will you discover why one right to bear arms was so high on the list. The part about the other part that she took was to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed on. Those are powerful words, ladies and gentlemen. Powerful words. I don't know if you know how powerful they really are. So anyway, from there on out, okay, I came from Detroit just recently. I live here in Boonesboro. I own a house. And the deal is this. In Detroit, we had a guy come in from Cleveland who took over the chief of police position in Detroit. He asked and begged that people please go out and get concealed weapons. Please do it. I want you to, as a deterrent. So they did. Guess how much that went down? It went down 25% of violence went down in the city of Detroit. And Detroit's not a good city. I know you guys know that, right? Huh? 25% is a large number, okay? But they turned around and decided, well, we're just going to let the criminals go without bail or anything else. Went back up to the same number, okay? So that's kind of the way that works, okay? Let's see here. I got to ad lib here again, so Let's see, okay. I was talking to a couple of people the other day. We were talking a place, well, you know what, I'm not gonna do it right now because of the fact I only got 10 seconds left. Okay, so thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Mr. Fonz. Jack Gary Underwood.
My name is Jack Gary Underwood. I live in the 4th Ward, and I am a gun owner. The U.S. and Virginia Constitutions call for a rejection of the present resolution for the following reasons. First, the U.S. Supreme Court holds the ultimate power to interpret the Second Amendment. All of our many opinions and all of our interpretations of the Second Amendment today, and there are many different ones in this room tonight, they have no legal weight. We all think they're right, but they have no legal weight. To be effective, our opinions must be reflected in state legislation, and even then the U.S. Supreme Court has the final say. And the Supreme Court has protected our Second Amendment rights very strongly, but they have said they are not unlimited. Second, the U.S. Constitution requires that this City Council follow state law. This City Council does not have the power to impose its interpretation of the Second Amendment on state legislation. This council is preempted from passing any resolution that conflicts with state law. Third, the Virginia Code specifically prohibits local governments from regulating firearms. That power is reserved to the state under Virginia Code 15.2915. Fourth, like most states, Virginia follows the Dillon Rule. Local governments have only those powers that are specifically granted to them by the state legislature. This brings us to the ultimate issues. First, has the General Assembly given this council the power to oppose and ignore state laws that the council has deemed to infringe on Second Amendment rights? Has the state legislature given this council the power to rule on the constitutionality of state law? No, it hasn't. Therefore, this council does not have the power to pass this resolution with effect. Second, even if this council did have the authority to pass the resolution, to the extent that it conflicts with state law, present or future, our Constitution says the resolution is null and void. The very Constitution that we get our Second Amendment rights from. So, we've established that the resolution will have no legal effect, but voting for it could have some negative effects. Kurt Dahmer told a very heartfelt story about a young woman who was small, being traumatized by, I'm not sure if it's a assailant or a stalker or what it was, but he said her only protection was a firearm. Well, guess what? If we had red flag laws, she would still have her firearm, only her assailant wouldn't have a firearm. He'd have a ball bat, and you don't want to go to a gunfight with a ball bat. 25 times more people die in
Thank you,
United
Mr.
States.
Underwood. Sorry, your time is up.
Thank you.
Zachariah Pratt. Zachariah Pratt.